Hello, friends. Welcome to Storycraft. On this channel, you will enjoy world top stories. Let's view the video. The Forgotten Kingdom of Aragon. The Rise of Aragon. From counts to kings a land, divided. The early days of Aragon. The story of Aragon begins in the shadow of mighty empires. In the 8th century, the Iberian Peninsula was a fragmented land, caught between the remnants of the Visigothic kingdom and the expanding power of the Umayyad Caliphate. The region that would become Aragon was little more than a patchwork of small Christian and Muslim territories, each vying for control. It was a time of war, diplomacy, and shifting alliances, a crucible from which the future Kingdom of Aragon would emerge. The Frankish influence and the birth of Aragon by the late 8th century, Charlemagne's Frankish Empire sought to expand its influence into the Iberian Peninsula. His campaign against the Moors led to the creation of the Spanish March, a buffer zone meant to defend Christian lands from Muslim incursions. Within this march, several small counties were established under Frankish protection, one of which was Aragon. Aragon's early rulers were counts, appointed by the Carolingians to maintain order and repel Moorish raids. These counts held limited power at first, but as the Frankish grip on the region weakened, they began asserting their independence. Among them was Count Aznar Galindez I, considered one of the founding figures of Aragon. His leadership in the early 9th century laid the groundwork for what would eventually become a formidable Christian stronghold. The struggle for survival. Aragon against Moors and rivals life in early Aragon was defined by constant struggle. The young county found itself surrounded by powerful enemies, Muslim emirs to the south, rival Christian kingdoms to the west, and ambitious Frankish lords to the north. The region's mountainous terrain provided natural defenses, but survival required more than just geography. It demanded strong leadership and military prowess. One of the defining moments in Aragon's history was the relentless fight against Muslim forces. Raids and counter-raids were frequent, and every victory, no matter how small, helped cement Aragon's resilience. Over time, the county's rulers developed a warrior culture, fostering a society that prized martial skill and strategic alliances, the break from Frankish control by the 10th century. The Carolingian Empire had weakened, and Aragon's counts seized the opportunity to free themselves from Frankish oversight. They began to rule with increasing autonomy, forging their own path without interference from distant emperors. This shift in power marked the true beginning of Aragon's independence. It was in this era that Aragon's rulers began intermarrying with the powerful Jimenez dynasty of Navarre, strengthening their claim to greater autonomy. By the early 11th century, Aragon was no longer just a county. It was an emerging political force, ready to step onto the broader stage of Iberian politics. Ramiro the Fair, the first king of Aragon. The defining moment in Aragon's rise came in 1035, when Ramiro I, the illegitimate son of King Sancho III of Navarre, was granted control over the county of Aragon. However, Ramiro had no intention of being a mere count. With ambition and military skill, he expanded Aragon's territory and declared himself its first king. Under Ramiro's rule, Aragon transformed from a minor county into a true kingdom. He pushed the borders southward, capturing key fortresses, from Muslim rulers and consolidating power within his domain. His reign set the stage for Aragon's future expansion and firmly established the kingdom as an independent entity. Expansion and the path to greatness. Following Ramiro I's death in 1063, his successors continued his mission of expansion. King Sancho Ramirez, his son, sought recognition from the Pope, aligning Aragon more closely with the broader Christian world. This move helped secure legitimacy and alliances, making Aragon a key player in the ongoing Reconquista. Sancho's reign also saw the kingdom's military forces modernized, adopting techniques and strategies from their European counterparts. With a professionalized army and growing wealth from newly conquered lands, Aragon's status in Iberia was on the rise. The Siege of Zaragoza, Aragon's defining victory. One of the most significant moments in Aragonese history came in 1118 when King Alfonso I, known as the Battler, led a campaign to capture the powerful Muslim city of Zaragoza. The siege was brutal, but after months of fighting, Aragonese forces emerged victorious. The conquest of Zaragoza not only expanded the kingdom's borders, but also cemented Aragon as a dominant force in Iberia. Alfonso I's military successes earned him a fearsome reputation, and under his leadership, Aragon became one of the leading Christian kingdoms in the peninsula. His reign symbolized the transition of Aragon from a regional power to a key player in the Iberian struggle for dominance. A kingdom poised for greatness. By the early 12th century, Aragon had come a long way from its humble origins as a small county under Frankish rule. It had grown into a powerful kingdom, capable of standing alongside Castile, Leon, and Navarre as an equal. But its journey was far from over. A Mediterranean powerhouse. Aragon's Golden Age. The rise of the Crown of Aragon. As the Kingdom of Aragon expanded its borders and solidified its place in Iberian politics. A transformative event occurred in 1137 that changed its destiny forever. The marriage between Ramon Berenguer IV, Count of Barcelona, and Queen Petronila of Aragon united. Two powerful realms, forming what would be known as the Crown of Aragon. This union did not create a single centralized state, but rather a confederation of territories under one ruler. The strength of this alliance propelled Aragon onto the international stage and laid the foundation for its golden age. Conquering. New lands, the expansion into Muslim territories. The Reconquista remained a central focus of Aragonese rulers. In 1213, King Peter II, known as Peter the Catholic, took part in the Battle of Muret, where he fell fighting the Crusaders, supporting the French expansion into Occitania. His son, James I, would inherit the throne and lead Aragon into a period of unprecedented growth. James I, known as the Conqueror, launched ambitious campaigns to expand Aragon's dominion. In 1229, he led the conquest of the Balearic Islands, defeating the Almohad rulers and establishing Christian rule in Mallorca. Just a few years later, in 1238, he captured the powerful Muslim city of Valencia, further strengthening the crown of Aragon's presence in Iberia. These victories not only expanded the kingdom's territory, but also increased its economic prosperity through trade and agriculture. the Aragonese fleet and dominance in the Mediterranean. With newfound territories came the need for a formidable navy. Aragon transformed into a maritime power, establishing one of the strongest fleets in the Mediterranean. The kingdom's strategic position allowed it to control key trade routes, connecting it to North Africa, Italy, and beyond. The rise of Aragonese naval supremacy was best demonstrated in the late 13th century, when King Peter III, son of James I, launched the Sicilian Vespers campaign in 1282. This was a decisive moment in European history, as Aragon successfully took control of the Kingdom of Sicily from the French Angevins. With this victory, Aragon became a dominant force in Mediterranean politics, controlling territories stretching from Iberia to the Italian peninsula. Trade, culture, and economic prosperity. The expansion of Aragonese influence was not solely based on military might. Economic prosperity and cultural exchange played an equally vital role. The Mediterranean trade networks flourished under Aragonese rule, bringing wealth and innovation to the kingdom. Merchants from Barcelona, Valencia, and Majorca engaged in commerce with North Africa, the Byzantine Empire, and the Middle East, making Aragon a crucial hub of international trade. Cities under Aragonese rule became centers of culture and learning. Gothic architecture flourished, and literary achievements thrived. The Livre dels Fets, the autobiography of King James III, remains one of the most important historical chronicles of the medieval era. The kingdom's diverse population, including Christians, Muslims, and Jews, contributed to a rich cultural and intellectual environment. The Aragonese influence in Italy and beyond. Following the success in Sicily, the kings of Aragon sought to expand their control over the Italian peninsula. By the 14th century, they ruled over Sardinia and Corsica, further cementing their dominance in the western Mediterranean. The Aragonese presence in Italy grew stronger under Alfonso V, the Magnanimous, who conquered the Kingdom of Naples in 1442. This victory marked the height of Aragon's influence in Europe, as it now held a vast and interconnected empire stretching from Iberia to the heart of Italy. Challenges and the seeds of future conflict. Despite its successes, the Crown of Aragon faced internal and external challenges. The complex nature of its governance, with multiple territories under a single ruler, but each maintaining its own laws and customs, often led to political tensions. Additionally, rising competition from other European powers, particularly France and the Ottoman Empire, threatened Aragonese dominance in the Mediterranean. By the late 15th century, the kingdom stood at a crossroads. It had reached the peak of its power, but changing political dynamics in Europe and Iberia foreshadowed a new era of challenges. The next chapter in Aragon's history would be shaped by its union with Castile and the dawn of a new Spanish Empire. Rivalry and union, the crown of Aragon and Castile. A kingdom of many crowns. By the late 15th century, the Crown of Aragon had become a vast confederation of territories, each maintaining its own laws, customs, and institutions. Unlike Castile, which was a centralized monarchy, Aragon was a collection of semi-independent states bound together under a single ruler. This decentralized nature allowed for local autonomy, but also made governance complex and fragile. While the kings of Aragon ruled over a powerful Mediterranean empire, their influence in Iberian affairs remained limited compared to Castile. The rise of Castile, a powerful neighbor. While Aragon expanded its dominion across the Mediterranean, Castile had been steadily growing into the dominant power in Iberia. The Reconquista was nearing its final chapter, with Castile pushing further into the last Muslim stronghold of Granada. Castile's economy, fueled by the vast plains of central Iberia and a strong agricultural base, allowed it to sustain prolonged military campaigns. As the 15th century progressed, the differences between the two kingdoms became increasingly apparent. Castile was a rising powerhouse, its monarchy seeking greater unification, while Aragon remained a loose confederation with divided interests. The relationship between the two realms was marked by both cooperation and rivalry, but a defining event would bring them closer together than ever before. The marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, a new era, begins. In 1469, a fateful marriage changed the course of Spanish history. Prince Ferdinand of Aragon and Princess Isabella of Castile were wed in a political union that would lay the foundation for the unification of Spain. This marriage, though often romanticized, was primarily a strategic alliance between two powerful kingdoms. However, despite their union, Castile and Aragon remained separate entities. Each retained its own laws, governments, and traditions. Ferdinand and Isabella ruled as co-monarchs, but their realms were not yet a single nation. Instead, they worked together to consolidate their power and strengthen their combined influence in Iberia and beyond. The fall of Granada, a joint victory. One of the most significant events of Ferdinand and Isabella's reign was the completion of the Reconquista. In 1492, after a prolonged siege, the last Muslim stronghold of Granada fell to Christian forces. This victory was a defining moment, marking the final chapter of centuries-long battles between Christian and Muslim rulers in Iberia. For Castile, this triumph solidified its dominance as the most powerful kingdom in Iberia. For Aragon, it provided a stronger position within the Union. Ferdinand played a crucial role in the military campaign, proving his strategic prowess. Yet despite their shared success, Aragon's influence remained secondary to that of Castile. The Age of Exploration. Aragon's changing role. The same year that Granada fell, Christopher Columbus set sail on his journey to the New World under the sponsorship of Isabella and Castile. While Castile looked westward toward the Americas, Aragon's interests remained firmly rooted in the Mediterranean. The shift in focus toward the New World altered the balance of power between the two kingdoms. Castile's wealth grew exponentially. Due to the influx of gold and silver from the Americas, while Aragon's Mediterranean empire, though still powerful, began to decline in relative importance. The rise of overseas colonial wealth left Aragon increasingly overshadowed by Castile. The foundations of a united Spain. Despite their differences, Ferdinand and Isabella worked tirelessly to strengthen the foundations of what would eventually become a united Spain. They established the Spanish Inquisition, reformed the nobility, and centralized aspects of governance, though Aragon resisted full integration. Ferdinand's later years were spent securing Aragon's influence in European affairs. He married into powerful dynasties, formed strategic alliances, and ensured that Aragon's Mediterranean territories remained key players in international politics. However, with his death in 1516, the union of Castile and Aragon was further solidified under his grandson Charles I, later Emperor Charles V, marking the beginning of Spain as a unified empire. The decline of Aragon's independence. Though Aragon remained an important part of the Spanish crown, its individual identity and autonomy gradually eroded. The policies of the Habsburg rulers, who followed Ferdinand, favored centralization, and Castile's dominance in the empire grew ever stronger. Aragonese institutions still held power, but the kingdom was no longer the independent force it had once been. The marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella had set in motion the process of Spanish unification, but it was a slow and complex journey. Aragon had played a crucial role in shaping Spain's history. Yet, as the 16th century dawned, it was clear that Castile would lead the way into the new age of empire. Decline and absorption, the fall of Aragon's independence, the winds of change by. The early 16th century, the Kingdom of Aragon found itself at a critical crossroads. The once powerful and independent kingdom had been slowly absorbed into the growing Spanish Empire. Aragon's individual identity, once so strong, was beginning to erode as Castile's influence expanded. The union with Castile, begun through the marriage of Ferdinand and Isabella, had led to significant political and social shifts that would eventually leave Aragon a shadow of its former self. The Habsburg era, centralization and the loss of autonomy. When King Ferdinand passed away in 1516, his grandson Charles I of Spain, later Emperor Charles V, inherited both the kingdoms of Castile and Aragon. Under the Habsburgs, Spain began to take on a more centralized form of governance. The consolidation of power in the hands of the Spanish monarchs meant that local autonomy, a characteristic feature of Aragonese rule, would be increasingly restricted. Charles III's reign marked the beginning of the end for Aragon's independence. While the kingdom still maintained its separate institutions, including its own laws, courts, and Cortes, parliament, it was becoming clearer that these privileges were under threat. The growing power of the Spanish crown and the spread of Habsburg policies slowly reduced Aragon's ability to govern itself without interference from the centralized Spanish monarchy. The War of Spanish Succession, the final blow. The 18th century brought with it one of the most significant challenges to Aragon's independence, the War of Spanish Succession, 1701–1714. Following the death of Charles II of Spain, the last Habsburg ruler, Europe was thrown into a dynastic conflict over who should succeed him. The war was a struggle between the Bourbon family, who supported Philip V, and the Habsburgs, who backed Archduke Charles. Although Aragon had long been a supporter of the Habsburgs, it found itself on the losing side of the war. With the eventual victory of Philip V, the Bourbon dynasty sought to solidify its control over the Spanish Empire. One of the first actions taken by the new king was to enact the Decree of New Planta in 1716, a series of laws that dismantled the traditional rights and privileges of Aragon. The Decree of New Planta centralized Spain even further, dissolving the Aragonese Cortes, banning the use of the Aragonese language in official matters, and imposing Castilian law. This marked the final blow to Aragon's autonomy, and the once proud kingdom became a mere province within the Spanish Empire. The loss of Aragon's unique identity. The Decree of New Planta effectively erased much of what made Aragon unique. The kingdom's separate institutions, such as its regional laws, courts, and tax systems, were replaced with a uniform Spanish system, stripping Aragon of its individuality. The Aragonese language and culture, once a defining feature of the kingdom, were suppressed in favor of Castilian Spanish. The legacy of Aragon's fall. Though Aragon was no longer an independent kingdom, its legacy remained woven into the fabric of Spanish history. The crown of Aragon had once been a formidable force in the Mediterranean, shaping the political, economic, and cultural landscapes of its time. The impact of its rulers, from the military conquests to the cultural exchanges, had left an indelible mark on the history of Spain and Europe. The fall of Aragon also had a lasting impact on Spain's internal politics. The decentralized nature of the Crown of Aragon had created a unique balance of power within the Iberian Peninsula, and its collapse contributed to the centralization that defined the modern Spanish state. Aragon's decline was a pivotal moment in the evolution of Spain from a collection of separate kingdoms into a unified empire. Legacy of Aragon. Traces of a lost kingdom. The aftermath of Aragon's fall. The official dissolution of the Kingdom of Aragon in the 18th century marked the end of an era. The Decree of New Planta in 1716 obliterated the region's historical autonomy, but the legacy of Aragon's influence on Spain and Europe was far from forgotten. Despite being absorbed into the Spanish crown, the cultural, legal, and political contributions of Aragon continued to resonate long after its political demise. Aragon's distinct identity persisted in the memories of its people and the regions that once formed its kingdom. Though the centralized Spanish state sought to assimilate Aragon into a more homogeneous identity, elements of its rich history remained embedded in the culture, language, and customs of the region. A kingdom remembered. Though Aragon no longer holds political power, it remains a kingdom remembered for its achievements in governance, military prowess, culture, and legal innovation. The echoes of its past are preserved in the hearts of its people, who continue to honor its history. Aragon's tale is not one of tragic defeat, but rather of lasting influence, a kingdom that, though forgotten in name, lives on through the legacies it left behind. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel Storycraft for more interesting videos.